Like zoinks! Welcome to the very first episode of the Unmasked History of Scooby Doo, the podcast where we delve into the mystery of Scooby Doo media, getting clues from people who helped bring our favorite mystery solving dog to life on various platforms, and maybe eating some Scooby snacks along the way. I'm your host, Alexa Lawler.
Scooby Doo, where are you?
And it would have been mine if it hadn't been to those meddling kids.
Gang, we've just been handed our next mystery.
Blasted meddling kids.
Today, I'm super excited to share my interview with Rich Dickerson with you guys, who you may know from a certain Scooby Doo theme song. But before we get started, I just want to introduce myself and why I wanted to start this podcast. My name's Alexa, and I'm a huge Scooby Doo fan and a bit of a collector. Ever since I was a kid, I would not only watch Scooby Doo movies and episodes on repeat, but I would also watch the special features that included the making of specials with interviews with producers, directors, voice actors, etc. I was absolutely fascinated by these, and so when I got my degree in journalism and fell in love with interviewing people, I decided I wanted to start this podcast to get some behind the scenes info from people who worked on Scooby that may not have been featured on those specials, but especially for the more recent incarnations of Scooby, a lot of those features actually aren't being done anymore. But that's probably enough about me and the reasons why this podcast began. So without further ado, here's my interview with Rich Dickerson. Rich Dickerson has quite an expansive songwriting catalog within the Scooby-Doo franchise, writing songs for Legend of the Vampire, Monster of Mexico, but probably most notably, writing the theme song and other music for What's New Scooby-Doo. Hey Rich, how's it going?
Good, how are you?
Good. And I've got to say, your songs are some of my personal favorites within the Scooby-Doo franchise, so it's such a pleasure to have you on the show today.
Thank you very much. That's crazy.
Just to kick off here, if you're game, I'd like to start with a bit of a 3-question trivia game.
Okay.
First question, how many direct-to-video movies for Scooby-Doo have had full soundtrack albums released? I'll give you options here. A, 1, B, 2, or C, 3.
I'm going to say 1.
It's actually 3.
Really? Because one of the interesting things were there any of them with my songs?
No, there was one from The Witch's Ghost,
Right.
Alien Invaders, and then they actually released one with mostly instrumental from WWE, Curse the Speed Demon.
Yeah, because when I was doing it, I suggested that to the music department. I knew the woman really well at the music department, and I had done music supervision before that. I was the music supervisor on Queen of the Damned, that movie, and I put the soundtrack together. So I was like, hey, wouldn't it be great if we did like Scooby Doo, soundtrack? And it was kind of like a half-hearted, oh yeah, and they just never did it. So.
And that actually answers one of my questions right off the bat. I'm really interested in Scooby-Doo music, and I would have loved to have like a What's New Scooby-Doo soundtrack, for example, but definitely like Legend of the Vampire, Monster of Mexico. So moving on to question 2, true or false, What's New Scooby-Doo had 56 episodes across all 3 seasons?
56, maybe. I thought it was 52, but I'm going to say true.
It's false. It was
What?
actually 42.
Oh, okay. I have the cue sheets, so I could look it up, but
And last question, how many different versions of the What's New Scooby-Doo theme have been used within the franchise? A, 3, B, 5, or C, 2?
I'm going to say 5.
It was 3.
I suck at this. Because I just found one, I don't even know how, but it's for a movie that might come out.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, if you just, I don't know, YouTube. This was like a real presentation for a movie that they're going to do.
Oh, awesome.
But then I found out that it's something that's been in the works for a long time.
Okay.
But they had some guys singing it, and the whole thing. It was a version I never heard before.
Interesting. Well, maybe I'll have to look that up because, as I'm aware, there was just the Simple Plan original, the Ann
Yeah.
Arbor version that they brought back a couple times, and then the Hex Girls.
Yeah.
To kick off the actual questions, what's your relationship with Scooby Doo? Did you grow up watching, or had you never heard of it until you were told to write music for it?
Oh no, no, I loved Scooby Doo. You know, I watched it. Probably all of them. I mean, I'm much of a fan as anybody else. How it all came about was, I mean, if I'll tell you the story, it was, um, I was the head of music over at a company called Icebox.com, and I was doing theme songs and overseeing the music for a bunch of their shows. And when Icebox went under, Joel Kuwahara was VP of production, and he went over to Warner Brothers and he said, "Hey," he called me up one day and said, "Hey, I like what you were doing over there and at Icebox, so come over and meet some people at Warner Brothers." So I went in just thinking it's a meet and greet, and I went into a room and there was about 5 or 6 people there. I, just told them my story, and they literally slid a cassette across the table and said, "Well, we're doing a new Scooby Doo Legend of the Vampire movie. Do the music." And I was like, "Whoa." But that's how it all got started. So they liked what I did, and I also wrote the songs in that. And then right behind it, they were doing Monster in Mexico, and they were very happy with me, so they put me on that. And I got to write songs for that. And then when What's New Scooby Doo, the show was about to happen, which was pretty much right after Monster, um, they put me on that also. And then Christopher Keenan, who's executive producer, called me into his office one day and said, "Hey, I like the songs you've been writing. I want to have a new theme song, and name of the show is going to be What's New Scooby Doo, and I want you to have first crack at it."
Awesome.
Yeah.
So, after starting your career in a band called Crosswind, for those that don't know, how did you end up moving over to working on movies and animation?
Um, well, I'm from Long Island, New York, and I played in a band and had a record deal for about 5 minutes with RCA. And it went away, and I had done enough, and I literally packed my car up with, I had 2 guitars and an amp and some clothes, and drove across the country. My bass player had moved to LA and said, "Come out here," and I did, and really just started making my way. I didn't want to I didn't want to be on the creative side at all. I wanted to work for like a record label and publishing, and that's what I did. And I got into music supervision, but I always wrote. When you're a writer, songwriter and composer, you're always writing. So eventually at uh, Icebox was when there was just a moment. It was a last minute thing where the creator of one of the shows wanted a theme song for his show, and the show was going to air that you know night. So I just wrote it just because it just wasn't time, and he liked it. And then another show asked me to write a song, and then a show asked me to score the show. So it all everything came full circle. And then when they went under, Joel made that call to me, and it just put me right back in the creative side of writing music.
Perfect. Was Legend of the Vampire your first experience with full length animation?
Yes, yes. Icebox was 3 to 4 minute flash animated episodes.
What was jumping into that like?
Scary, but I think pretty quick on my feet. So uh, I can tell you the first music review of the whatever, um, they everybody was in the room, like a couple executives and producers and stuff, and they're pointing things out that I had missed, because in animation you have to hit everything, especially in Scooby Doo. So if he blinks his eye, you got to hit like with a little triangle, or you know what I mean. Every movement. I learned really fast that in animation, the music really supports the action that's on the screen. So I was very good at kind of just saying, "Oh well, this is just the first pass, and we just wanted to get you a feel of what the music's going to be like. There's so much more that we have to do." And they were all like, "Oh, okay, okay." And I was like, "Oh man," So you know, I did not sleep for months, because I'd never done it before, really, you know. But I learned really fast, and they were very happy with me. So
And you mentioned a bit of the difference, but to elaborate, what are the differences between working on music for a live action film versus working on music for animation?
animation usually is wall to wall, not always, but it's wall to wall music, because it's supporting the story, it's supporting the action, it's supporting the movements of the characters. So, and live action, you're supporting the scenes. You're supporting the mood. You're not supporting, not normally. Um, you're not supporting the action of the actor. I mean, this is not written in stone. Like lots of lots of these are different. Lots of shows call for different things now, but Scooby Doo is wall to wall music, and four different genres of music in one episode. It's a lot more work if you ask me, but it's a lot of fun too. Like no show is the same for me, fortunately.
Definitely. So, what is the writing process like when it comes to writing for animation?
Well, usually we get an animatic. I'll get an animatic, and boy, people ask me this, and well, first you'll sit down with either the creator or the producer, showrunner, whoever's running the show, and you discuss what they're looking for. And depending on who you're working with, they either have a very strong idea of what they want, or they don't know at all. And the whole point is to, you're coming from two opposite goalposts, and you're trying to get to the midfield, right to the middle, to where that happy place where everybody, like, this is the music, that we want. This is the style that we want.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
once you get to that point, then it really is, you'll get an automatic, uh, do a music spotting session with the director, as to where, you know, they want music, or where you think you could put music, or where they don't want music. And then really just kind of go from, the beginning of the time code, 000, and just start scoring scenes, and, coming up with ideas.
And are you constantly tweaking until the final cut of the episode is done, or is there a moment when music finishes?
Yeah, I tweak because when I go through it, it's like I could watch it 100 times and think, oh, there could be music there, or man, there's an extra snare drum hit that just shouldn't be there. Like the littlest things, or adding a finger cymbal. Everything's done, and all of a sudden it's like, oh man, a finger cymbal would be so good. A little ding right there would be so good. And yeah, I do that. So
And one of the main things with Scooby Doo is obviously the chase songs. What was it like getting to take a stab at those?
that was the most fun I ever had, because um, the first season they just let me write them for the most part. They didn't put any thought into, like, oh, we could promote Warner Brothers bands, here in this chase scene. Well, they just let me write them, and so like songs like Hong Kong Holiday and things like that were just too much fun to write, because uh, you know Christopher Keenan asked me one day, he's like, Rich, how do you score the show and write the song? And I said, well, we started 000, and you go to how many minutes, and then there's that 1 minute chase scene, and so then I just switched to, like, I got to write a song, whether it's going to get away or whatever, kind of what's taking place in the theme of the show. I said, most of the time I do it in the shower. It was true. I'm either driving or in the shower when I come up with the ideas for the songs. So
Were there ever any times where you wouldn't be writing the lyrics for those songs, or did you mainly write both the score and the lyrics?
I usually write both. There were some instances where some of the writers wanted to write some of the Lindsay Picano stuff. Jim Krieg was a is a great writer, and he was like, "Hey, is it cool if I throw some lyrics together?" And I'm very happy to co-write and collaborate. So I did that with him. I don't know about any. I mean, I've done it with on other shows with people, and I'm always happy to do it. It's fun working with somebody. But for the most part, Scooby, it was just me, just writing lyrics and just sitting with my guitar or the piano and just writing the song right there.
And do you have a process of writing music first or lyrics first, or does it all kind of come together?
It's either or. There's no set way for me.
When you were working on Scooby, did you have complete freedom to write anything you thought fit within the episode or the movie that you were working on, or were there specific parameters that you needed to follow?
Not really. It was pretty wild, wild west. It was. I was working with Chuck Sheets on the series and Scott Gerald's on the movies, and it's really what I love about animation is that everybody respects everybody's else's, I don't know, abilities, and they respected mine. And if they didn't like something, they would tell me, like, can take another pass at this or something. But I don't really have a memory of anybody ever saying, can you write something different? They liked everything I did for that.
How hard is it to write a song that fits within the theme or tone of the episode or movie that you were working on?
I This is another question people ask me, and it's I don't want to make it sound so easy, but I just look at it. I can look at a one sheet. Like if a show is going to be developed, and they'll and they want to have a theme song, right? And I'll say, just send me a one sheet with all the information and any artwork that you have. And for whatever reason, I can just look at it and go, and then something pops into my head, and I'm like, oh, this would be good. And then I just write it. But, I base, lyrically, I base it off of, what the story's about, as far as with Scooby Doo. Or like I said, for any shows that are being developed, I'll read the one sheet and they'll give you sort of what the log line is of the show and character descriptions, and I'll create lyrics out of that.
How far does it push your songwriting skills when at one point you're writing songs about running away from vampires in Australia for Legend of the Vampire to, road tripping to Mexico and Monster of Mexico to all the various storylines in What's New Scooby Doo episodes?
Um, I I think about that, and um, when I was a kid, like radio was in the car, it played everything, and my parents didn't. They were not musical, but they loved records and the radio, but they had no they had no genre that they were you know that they stuck to. So I grew up just listening to everything all over the map. I mean everything. So I think that's what helps me, when it comes to, oh, I have to write a Scooby Doo. Like I have a new project coming up, and it's all very pop. It's going to be pop type songs, and there's going to be a lot of them. And I was doing a Zoom meeting this morning, and I said, "Yeah, I got to start getting in my head back into that world."
So you had mentioned being interested in a soundtrack for the Scooby Doo projects that you had worked on. Would you be interested in doing something like that now if the opportunity came up?
Oh yeah, yeah, sure. But they don't. Yeah, there's been a new regime over there at Warner Brothers, and I've, you know, all the people that I worked for and that kept me, put me on everything and some Tom and Jerry stuff and some Firehouse Tales and things. They all got fired. Like there was a clean sweep. I don't know how that all works, but board of directors or whatever, they let everybody go, and they were all the producers that kept me on, and the new people that came in, um, pretty much just said, well, we have our own people, so I haven't been back there. I'd like to, but they haven't reached out to me.
If the opportunity arose to work for Scooby specifically again, would you hop on that?
Oh, in a heartbeat. It's a great show.
What are the benefits and most fun things about writing for a Scooby Doo episode or movie?
It's a good question. I guess the subject matter, of like, um, you know, uh, Hong Kong holiday, or you got something like that, or um, you're all over the map, and that's like the notes from Warner Brothers as far as scoring the show. When I first started, they said we want to be able to close our eyes and know that the gang are in Russia, or they're in Mexico, or they're in Japan, because they travel all over. So incorporate those instruments into the score, which made it a lot of fun to work on. So that goes hand in hand with the songs also, and that's what the fun part was like all the pirates sing. It's one of my favorite songs.
And in contrast, what are maybe the challenges or difficulties in writing for Scooby Doo?
Hmm. To be honest, I'm trying to think of it was a great, I don't know, 3 to 4 year run, and it was there wasn't really any, to be honest. I mean, the people I worked with were great. Chuck was great, Scott was great, Marge, you know, everybody was great. Um, and the notes were so minimal. You know, I remember we would start, and there would be, I don't know, 7, 8, executives or producers in the room, reviewing the music, and then by episode 3 there were, 2, and one of them said, "You guys got this. I don't have to come anymore." Which was, so I didn't, to be honest, I didn't have many challenges at all in that show.
Awesome. That's a probably pretty a good vote of confidence there. Moving more to chat about what's new Scooby Doo. When it came to writing the theme song, were you aware at the time you were writing who would be performing it?
No, but I'll tell you some good stories about that song. So, as a writer, like I had said before, you're always writing. You just come up with ideas and you're writing. And I had written, I wrote this chorus that I thought was the best thing I ever wrote. So catchy, right? And the lyrics were very different. As when I'm talking to myself, there's you and no one else, and all my colors turn to blue. When the daisy petals fall, there's nothing left at all. I'll remember you, right? And I was like, man, this is so good. And if I could finish this, maybe I could get it to like Blink 182 or somebody like that, And I could
Yeah.
never really come up with a verse for it. Could never finish a verse that I was happy with. So Christopher calls me into his office one day, and he said, like I said, he says, I want to give you first crack at it. The name of the show is What's New Scooby Doo. And immediately that went right into that melody that I had for that song. By the time I got to my car in the parking garage, I had the whole song written in my head. Then I went back to my studio, sat on the couch, wrote out the lyrics, wrote the chorus, the verse, came up with good verse chords and melody, and I was like, I put that song together in a half hour.
That's amazing.
It really, and sent it back to Christopher by the end of the day. And I had to use a messenger because you couldn't share files then. And he calls me, he's like, I have no idea how you did this so fast. He goes, but I love it. He goes, I love it. He goes, it's going to have to pass a few committees, but he goes, I love it. So as it was going through the, whatever the channels at Warner Brothers, at one point, the woman that was head of the music department said, hey, we're going to get Tom Jones to sing this. And I was like, okay, so we need like a version, with horns and stuff for Tom Jones. And I was like, all right. Now, my mom was a huge Tom Jones fan, so I knew what the horn should sound like and everything. So I did it. I put it, and I sang the sort of scratch vocal, and I did it in a goofy kind of Tom Jones way, and sent it over, and they were like, "Hey, this is great. We're gonna get Tom and all that." And I was disappointed because I did write it as a Blink kind of song, and I don't know. It was like only a few weeks before the show was going to air, they called and they said, "Hey, we have a Warner Brothers band, Simple Plan, and they're in Canada, and they're going to do it." And I was like, "Great!" And I was very adamant that they do it exactly the way that I wrote it, because and all the same harmonies and everything. And I said, I will fly myself there. I'll put myself up just so I can just be there. And they were like, no, and the woman in charge of music, she said, I'll be there. She goes, Rich, if there's anything, wrong at all, she goes, I'll call you and I'll get you up here. And when they did it, it was exactly how I'd done on the demo.
That's
And
perfect.
I never got to meet them. And a few years ago, a friend of mine, he's a music publisher, and he said, "Hey, Simple Plan's playing over at the Troubadour. You want to go?" I was like, "Yes." So we're at the back of the Troubadour and just watching. I didn't expect them to play the song, and all of a sudden they started playing the song, and they said, "Hey, and I got choked up, and so because it was really cool. And then I got to meet them afterwards, and I got to know the guitar player pretty well. So
What was it like to watch them be playing your song live?
it was the same as when I first watched the first episode on TV, because it was the biggest thing I'd ever done, And I struggled in band, my band, and just my parents were always very supportive of me, and I did it probably longer than I should have been doing it. And it was that morning watching the, Saturday morning cartoon. And I kept thinking that they're going to replace it. At some point, just didn't believe it. I thought, not until I'm watching it on TV am I going to believe it. And I sat there with, Cocoa Puffs and the whole thing. And I just started crying because I thought about my parents, like, it kind of gave it validation for me working so hard for so long. And it was the same type of thing. It was like, wow, this is playing, because I was in a band like that and it was so great to see it like live, you know. So
Definitely.
yeah.
And really, the What's New Scooby Doo theme song has become such a fan favorite, and it's up there and even surpasses the original Where Are You theme song in some people's rankings. Did you ever imagine that it would get that kind of reaction when you first wrote it?
Well, that's news to me right now, to be honest. No, I didn't. I've had two weird instances with Ubers. Um, I got in an Uber. Well, the one I can. I got in an Uber and the guy just starts singing it, you know. And I said, Why are you singing that song?" And he goes, "Oh, when I was a kid," he goes, "that was my favorite song. Because my favorite show." And so I said, "I wrote that song." And he was like,
Really?
What?" Yeah, yeah. And there was another Uber thing that was similar. So those were the only two, like, you know. I mean, some people really, you know, I don't know. I don't, like, I'm really happy and thrilled, and it's, kind of, gives me meaning to my life. I did that. That was one thing. I've written a lot of other things, but none as famous as that. And so, I definitely feel like, I contributed a little bit, making kids, happy.
And, being behind the scenes in the music department, you maybe don't get as much, fame and glory from that. But do you get the amount of pride that you can be in an Uber and be like, "Oh, I wrote that song that you're humming right now"?
Yeah, well, because you don't think, you don't think about it, but so it's always like a surprise. I don't think, oh, I wrote the Scooby Doo song, because I'm always looking for the next gig. I'm always looking for the next show, and trying to keep the career going. So uh, so you just don't think about it, and so those are reminders, and it's like, oh yeah, yeah.
And was there more pressure writing that theme song than there was for, writing the chase songs for within an episode?
No, because like I said, I did it. I By the time I got to the parking garage, I had the whole song written in my head. It was that fast. And those are always the best songs. As a songwriter, anything that I've written that you know is that I consider really good is, when I think about it, it's always the ones that I wrote quickly.
Well, I can certainly say it's one of my favorites for sure.
Good.
At the time, What's New Scooby Doo especially was using a lot of songs that would kind of fall into the, pop punk, pop rock, punk rock genre.
Yeah,
Obviously, some Simple Plan songs used as chase songs and Ramones as well.
yeah.
When it came to the songs that you were writing, were you asked to write songs that kind of fit within that genre, or was that just something that kind of happened on some of them?
It was just the way the show was, and it's you know one of my strongest. That's my wheelhouse. You know what I mean? That's kind of how I write. I mean, I've written a lot of girl pop songs for Disney's Next Big Thing, or um, Twinkle Toes, or a lot of. I've done a lot of preschool stuff, but that is where you know my that's where I'm strongest, I guess, if you want to put it that way. And also, like, Chuck Sheets, that was his, like, he chose all of those Ramones and all those other songs. So he had that sensibility also. So we got on really well.
Okay. And in addition to writing a lot of those songs, you also performed quite a few of them as well. Did you have a choice on which ones you got to perform yourself and maybe which ones other people were brought in?
That's funny because um, when I was in a band, I was a singer, and so but I would just do them as scratch vocals. You know what I mean? I would do my best, but it was always, you lay that down, and then they're going to bring somebody else in to do it, or I'm going to get somebody to do it. But sometimes they would just say, no, this is fine, it's good. So that was kind of cool too. Like, when I hear some of them, especially ones I've forgotten, and it's like, oh yeah, that's me.
What was it like to, maybe be watching an episode or something and actually hear your voice?
Yeah, that was a big thrill. Yeah, you know, because I never thought I'd be doing this. I never thought I'd work in animation, or even, less work on Scooby Doo. I was just a songwriter. Like I said, writing, hoping that maybe, Blink 182, or whoever, would you know do one of my songs. But I never ever thought I'd be in animation, and I love it. I loved it from day one, and it's a lot of fun, and it's the people too. I worked in live action, I've worked in animation, and I can tell you that the difference is the people. You know, People are a lot of fun to work with in animation.
And were all the songs that you had written for the show or for the movies used, or were there any that didn't actually end up making it?
Yeah, there's probably a couple that didn't make it, or no. You know what it was? The pirate song. I don't. That's on a DVD, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was supposed to be in an episode, I believe, and for some reason, it was a mistake they made somewheres along the line, because they told me, they're like, "Oh, we're so sorry," blah blah blah. It was some kind of mistake, but they said, we promise you, we'll get it into something. And so then they put it in that, and it's one of my, I think I said it before. It's one of my favorite Scooby Doo songs.
Oh, really? That's awesome
Yeah,
that they made the effort to actually get it in something.
yeah, they were all great. Like I said, everybody was great to work with over there.
I'm sure you probably have the same answer for this one, but what was your favorite song that you've written for the Scooby franchise?
Well, it has to be "What's New Scooby Doo." you know,
Definitely.
yeah.
After working on Scooby and also being a Scooby Doo fan growing up on it, what's your favorite Scooby Doo memory? Is it from watching it as a kid or is it from working on it?
Oh, definitely from working on it. Because writing the music, you're one of the last in line in the production. Um, so and you're not in the building, you're in your own studio, so you don't get to see a lot of people, especially when you've been doing it for a while, and it's just you and the director, and um, you don't see a lot of the other people unless there's a rap party or the Christmas party or something. But I do remember um, a producer coming up to me, somebody who I never met, and it was at, I think, the uh, was it a bowling party? I remember that. And no, I didn't know anybody, so I'm not really talking to people. And he went out of his way to come up and say, "Hey, I love the music on the show. I absolutely love it." And he had nothing to do with the show. And it was, I just, that meant a lot to me, that here's an executive coming up to me, going out of his way you know, to recognize the music.
What was it like going from growing up on a show to working on it and a show that such has such a big reputation?
I was too scared to think about it. I mean, really did not. All those years from Legend of the Vampire all the way through What's New Scooby Doo, you're so consumed. You're not. It's weird. You're not sleeping. You're not. You're completely consumed in the show, which I absolutely love. I don't have hobbies, so I live and breathe this stuff. So, it, you know, you don't have time to think about it until, like I said, when it came on for the first time and I sat there and I watched it, all those emotions came up.
And last question, moving a little bit more broadly, why do you think that a cartoon series about a talking dog solving mysteries with his friends has been able to have so much staying power throughout various incarnations across 50 years now?
One of the explanations, I forget who it was, a producer told me that the reason the show has legs and staying power is because kids can watch it because they know, even though it can be scary, they know at the end when they unmask that villain that it's not going to be a monster, it's going to be a person. So
Definitely.
it's there's something about that gives the show legs. Plus, the all great shows have great writers, you know, and also the great VO actors on this show. And you have to have great writing for a successful show. I always think that. And Scooby Doo always had great writers.
That covers all of my questions. Is there anything else you wanted to add at all?
Trying to think with Scooby Doo. I mean, like I said, it was the best time of my life. It was the most work I ever did, but it was, it was just nonstop, no sleep. And also, it was the best group of people that I got to work with. It was just wonderful. The whole, from the executive producers all the way down, it was just a great, great bunch of people. And it was just a lot of fun. I really love it. And I'm always, hoping to do another Scooby thing at some point. But it was my favorite time of my life.
So, just before we end, do you have any recent projects that you'd like to promote, or any social media channels or websites or anything where people can follow what you're up to?
Well, I can tell you a couple of the things that I've been doing. There's a new show that'll come out. I guess I can say it. Um, I don't know if I can say it. Maybe I shouldn't. But it's with the same. So I did a show called Tasty Tales of the Food Truckers, and it plays internationally. You'd have to Google and see if you could find it. But I was working with Dan Clark and Oscar Covert, and they're great. And they have a new show that I'm working on, which is really good. But I think I might have signed an NDA, so I can't say what it is. Um, I'm going to start finishing up the second season of Rainbow Rangers. Uh, I did Peking Duckling. I did a show called Shark Dog. It was shorts for Shark Dog. It was Nickelodeon UK, and now they're going to develop it into a. Well, that was one of my favorite shows. Club Penguin. I did a show for an Irish animation company called Urban Tales, which is really good. I did Peking Duckling, which was a lot of fun. I just did Purple Turtle for another Irish company. Um, so those are the things that I've been doing recently.
Sounds like you're fairly busy most of the time.
Never busy enough, you know. I don't use an agent or anything like that. I do all my own networking. I do, just I've just been in it long enough, so I just kind of do all that myself. So it's a constant, job of trying to bring in the next, shows. And so I stay very busy, but you're always looking for that next Scooby Doo.
I think that covers everything. Thank you so much for chatting with me today, Rich.
No, thanks for reaching out. These things are always a surprise to me. I was like, oh, okay.
And that concludes today's episode. Another huge thank you to Rich Dickerson for being on the show and also for sending me some really cool behind the scenes photos. So if you want to see the lyric sheet for What's New Scooby Doo or a photo of the guitar the What's New Scooby Doo theme was written on, be sure to check at Unmasked SD on Twitter, at Unmasked SD Podcast on Instagram, or at unmaskedsdpodcast.com. If you liked this episode and want to hear more, also make sure to check those social media channels or the website. And if you want to follow Rich, he's on Instagram at richmusic or at richdickerson.com. Thanks for listening, and keep an ear out for the next episode. Scooby Dooby Doo!